My beloved child, you thought because I didn't shout, I didn't care, but I was right there, aching while you ran after what glittered but could never satisfy. I stood at the edge of your choices, watching you build towers of self-dependence that shook with every storm, and though I could have intervened, I allowed silence to grow louder than noise, hoping it would draw you home. You mistook my stillness for distance, but it was mercy. I was giving you space to return on your own, to turn your head and say, "Jesus, I miss you." But day after day you woke up, reached for your phone, your desires, your ambitions, but not me. I watched while your heart was slowly pulled in every direction except mine. You clung to people who didn't value you. You opened doors that I tried to close, and yet I stayed silent, waiting, not because I didn't care, but because I wanted your yes to be real. I could have forced circumstances to bring you to your knees, but I didn't want obedience out of fear. I longed for surrender out of love. Now hear me clearly, the silence is ending. The mercy of delay is lifting. You are closer to the edge than you realize, and I can no longer hold back the consequences that are knocking at your door. I waited while others betrayed you, hoping you'd recognize the difference between my love and theirs. I watched you spend time with people who drained you, while I, the one who gives life, stood just a whisper away, ignored. You invested your energy in what withers, and neglected the one who holds eternity. I wasn't absent. I was restrained, and that restraint is lifting now. You think you have more time, but time is collapsing faster than your senses can detect. You not test me any further. My hand has hovered, my grace has shielded, my voice has whispered, but the hourglass is merely empty. This is not about me leaving you. It's about you rejecting me so many times that now I must honor your will. You are not abandoned. You are being handed what you've chosen repeatedly. I wanted to walk beside you in peace, but you've insisted on walking alone in chaos. And now, the silence that once felt merciful will become the silence of absence. If you feel me fading, it's because I'm no longer standing in delay. I'm stepping back, and this time, I will not wait for you any longer. And still, with each passing moment, I came closer, knocking not with force, but with gentleness, hoping that your spirit would tremble and open. But instead, you turned up the noise. You laughed with false security, believing that tomorrow belonged to you. How many times did I touch your heart while you were scrolling, sitting alone, aching inside? How often did I interrupt your rest with strange unease, a divine tension within your chest, pleading with you to come talk to me, not to impress me with polished prayers, but to simply be with me in your weakness, your questions, your truth. I placed opportunities in your path, conversations from strangers, late-night thoughts, interrupted plans, all laced with my fingerprints, but you brushed them off like dust. You assumed the knock was just coincidence, not realizing it was your final lifeline. And now, my child, the handle you refused to grasp is beginning to rust shut. I'm not threatening you. I'm revealing what is already happening. The door that stood open, waiting, ready to cover you from the storms to come, is beginning to shift on its hinges. You thought it would always remain wide, but that was never promised. I don't shut doors to punish. I shut them to protect my holiness from mockery, from repeated rejection wrapped in delay. Every time you told yourself later, the door groaned a little more. You didn't hear it creak because you were too consumed with what glitters and burns. The time for tapping gently is almost gone. Soon, the knocking will cease, not because I don't want you, but because your unwillingness has spoken louder than your lips ever did. My mercy is not weakness, and my pursuit is not forever. This is not a warning you can afford to skim. Your breath is a gift on lease, every heartbeat is borrowed space, and yet you gamble your eternity for fleeting approval. You chase relevance in a fading world while the eternal waits without applause. The door is still cracked open, but barely. You must understand, I do not compete with your preferences. I do not stand in the line of your priorities, hoping you choose me. I am the way, not an option. I am the truth, not one of many. I am the life, not a spiritual hobby. Every gentle knock was my way of inviting you into peace before the pressure increased. But now, the atmosphere is changing. The urgency of heaven is pressing against the timeline of earth. The window is closing, and this message is not emotional hype. It's eternal truth. Soon, the knock will be replaced by silence. Not because I'm absent, but because I'm honoring what you continually chose. Everything but me. I gave you years, moments, mercies, and you treated them like background noise. But this is your final awakening. You do not have forever. Your soul has an appointment, and it is approaching faster than you're prepared for. Stop believing the lie that delay is harmless. Delay is disobedience in disguise. Your indecision has become rebellion, and rebellion invites ruin. My child, this is not the time to be casual with my invitation. This is the season where every yes must be complete. No half-hearted nods. No future plans to get right someday. That someday is today. If you do not move now, the next time you reach for the door, it may not respond. If you feel a holy fear trembling in your soul right now, do not push it away. That is me, gripping your heart with the finality of what's at stake. The door is groaning, the time is thinning, and I will not knock forever. I watched you fall apart behind closed doors, and I bent low to catch every unseen tear. Yet still, you hardened your heart instead of handing me your sorrow. You were not abandoned in your breaking. I was seated beside your agony, whispering comfort the world could never replicate, but instead of letting me hold the cracked pieces of your soul, you gripped them tighter and looked elsewhere for a remedy. You thought your silence protected you, but in truth, it isolated you from my healing. You told yourself you were fine while you were unraveling, and I, who know your inner war better than you do, waited for the moment you'd stop pretending. But you never did. You put on the armor of pride to conceal the bleeding underneath, and though my whispers pierced the noise, you buried them under layers of distractions. You called busyness purpose and numbing progress, but I saw through every mask you wore. I saw how you smiled when you were drowning, how you laughed while anxiety gnawed at your thoughts, how you filled your schedule to escape the silence that kept pointing you back to me. I didn't leave you in those dark nights. I sat with you, speaking softly to your soul, urging you to open just one crack of honesty, but instead, you silenced me with entertainment, conversation, and noise. You couldn't bear to sit still because you feared I would speak, and if I spoke, you'd be held accountable for what you already knew, that your heart no longer belonged to me. My child, I never needed your perfection, only your surrender. I was not demanding performance. I was offering peace. But pride convinced you that vulnerability was weakness, and so you remained locked in a prison you built with your own hands. I sent you dreams to stir you, restlessness to wake you, and people to warn you, yet you dismissed it all as coincidence or confusion. You labeled conviction as emotional instability, all to avoid confronting the truth that I was calling you to repent, not to shame you, but to restore you. The more I whispered, the more you raised the volume of your own voice, and now the danger is this. Your ears have become dull to my sound. That's why I must speak differently now. You are nearing a place where even my thunder will sound like background noise. This is not where I wanted it to go, but you've grown comfortable ignoring the soft voice of your Savior. You taught your heart to normalize distance from me, and that numbness will cost you everything if you don't tear down what you've built between us. I'm not angry at your struggle. I'm grieved that you didn't bring it to me. I'm not surprised by your pain. I'm crushed that you thought I was uninterested. But now, I must expose what pride has covered. I must interrupt what distraction has disguised. You cannot serve your own kingdom while begging me for blessings. You cannot maintain the illusion of control and still expect the power of my spirit. If you do not break your silence now, the very pain that should have led you back to me will harden into bitterness, and bitterness will blind you. I don't want you blind. I don't want you hardened. I want you free. But I will not force you to be healed. I will not shout above the noise you've chosen. My whisper was your lifeline. And now, because you refused to answer, I must withdraw it. And if I go quiet, not because I'm far but because you trained your soul to dismiss me, what will you do then? Will the world comfort you when the mask cracks? Will pride protect you when storms arrive? You have one more moment to tear down what's blocking me. Don't waste it. I am still here, but I am not staying silent much longer. While the winds howled and the skies cracked open above your life, I wasn't distant. I was right there in the center of your chaos, calling your name louder than the thunder, reaching for you through every crashing wave. But instead of collapsing into my embrace, you braced yourself against me as though I were the threat. You wrapped your arms around your own understanding and refused to see that I was the only anchor capable of holding you. You saw me, but you chose to look away. You felt me tug at your soul, but you dismissed it as emotion, or timing, or pressure. I wasn't there to harm you. I was there to rescue you, to interrupt your descent into ruin, to preserve what little flame still flickered inside your chest. But every time I stretched out my hand, your heart retreated deeper into self-defense. I wasn't trying to expose your wounds to shame you. I was revealing them so I could heal them. But because you misunderstood my reach as punishment, you recoiled into silence, into people, into things that offered escape but not redemption. You saw the lightning and feared me, when you should have feared a life without me. I was the one shielding you from what you couldn't even see forming behind the scenes, the spiritual assaults aimed at your identity, the emotional landslides being planned against your sanity, the subtle dismantling of your purpose while you were too distracted to notice. I cried out not because I was desperate, but because I knew time was thinning, and you were walking toward cliffs disguised as comfort. You hardened yourself against my cries and chose to believe that if I truly cared, I would stop the storm. But child, I didn't calm it because I wanted you to learn to walk with me through it. What you called abandonment was actually invitation. You didn't need deliverance, you needed encounter. Yet even when I offered myself, in the middle of your mess, you blocked me with your conditions. You told me you'd follow when things made sense. You promised to obey once your fear calmed down. But faith is not formed in ease, it's revealed in storms. I wasn't angry at your fear, I was sorrowful that you let it guide your decisions more than my voice. You covered your ears, not because you couldn't hear me, but because you didn't want to. Somewhere deep inside, you knew what I would say. You knew I would call you higher, away from comfort, out of compromise, and into covenant, and that terrified you more than the chaos itself. So you ran not with your feet, but with your focus. You chose noise over nearness, survival over surrender. And yet I kept standing. I kept waiting. I kept calling. But I will not continue forever. The storm that once taught you to tremble should have taught you to trust. But now, it's becoming a flood, and I will not hold back the tide if you continue closing yourself to me. You cannot keep silencing me and still expect protection. You cannot reject my cry and then blame me when the silence gets louder. I am not the storm, I am the Savior standing in it, offering you the only escape. I cry not because I'm weak, but because your destiny is slipping through your fingers, and you don't even see it. I weep because your spirit is slowly drifting, numb to truth and deceived by shadows. This is not just a moment, it is the crossroads. Either you let me draw you in now, or you will be swept away by what you thought you could handle alone. I will not stand in the rain forever. My arms are still open, but they won't be forever. And when they drop, not in anger but in finality, you will remember that I stood there through it all. I read you. I cried. I waited. And then I stepped back. Don't mistake this moment as wrath, child. See it for what it truly is. A sacred interruption before it's too late. I am not here to strike you down, but to strip away the illusions you've clung to for too long, illusions that have disguised destruction as freedom and delay as harmless. You have arrived at a turning point where your decisions will no longer be shielded by grace extended on credit. What you choose next will shape everything that follows, not only for you, but for the ones who are unknowingly tied to your obedience. You don't see how many lives are impacted by your spiritual posture, how many futures are delayed because you keep putting me off. You've called it figuring things out, but in reality, you've been avoiding the very thing that would have healed you. This is not about condemnation, this is about consequence. I am revealing the weight of your steps so you understand what is really at stake. I can't allow you to keep walking this path without feeling the gravity of your resistance. It's not because I want you to fall, but because I want you to stop falling in the same cycle over and over again. This message isn't meant to scare you, it's meant to stop you, to wake you from the dangerous slumber you've fallen into. You've justified disobedience with convenience. You've excused compromise with logic. But heaven doesn't bend to earthly excuses. My kingdom doesn't adjust to rebellion. You've been warned in quiet ways, and now I am speaking louder, not out of fury, but out of urgency. Because if I don't speak now, if I don't confront you in this moment, you'll keep believing the lie that you're fine, that time is still on your side. But I see what's ahead. I see the trap set just beyond the next careless step. I see the devastation that's building like a storm behind the horizon of your choices. I am not here to shame you, I am here to rescue you before your will becomes your ruin. I didn't design you for cycles of regret and delayed surrender. I created you for purpose, for intimacy, for movement within my plan. But you've grown numb to conviction and addicted to convenience. You pray with your lips but live with divided loyalty. And now, I must expose what comfort has covered. Your heart has drifted, and I can no longer wait for you to return at your leisure. This is not about a momentary emotion, this is about eternity. Do you understand that? Eternity is not a theory, it is the reality you are stepping toward. With every choice, every yes and no, every compromise you call small. I've been trying to wake you gently, but now the shaking has begun. I will disrupt what is stealing your soul. I will remove what has become your replacement for me. I will allow things to fall if that's what it takes for you to finally see what you've become. Because I would rather see you break into truth than flourish in deception. I love you too much to remain silent while you wander into danger. I'm not punishing you, I'm pursuing you with the weight of my holiness, with the urgency of a father who knows time is running out. The light is still here, but it's fading. And once it lifts, the clarity you enjoy now will be gone. This is your moment of awakening. This is your line in the sand. I'm not promising another opportunity, because you've had so many already. Let this be the one that finally brings you to your knees, not in defeat, but in surrender. Because if you don't respond now, the future you've unknowingly invited will be your teacher, and the lesson will come with scars I tried to help you avoid. This isn't punishment. This is mercy shaking you before silence comes. I have whispered, nudged, redirected, and patiently waited through countless moments you didn't even recognize as divine interventions. But now that chapter has ended, I will no longer disguise truth in gentle signals. You've become too used to ignoring the soft stirrings of my spirit, too skilled at brushing off conviction as if it's optional. And so I must now allow you to see what your path truly looks like when my covering is lifted. This is not revenge, it is revelation. I have held back certain consequences out of mercy, but mercy abused becomes blindness. I can't let you keep walking in a fog, pretending you're fine while every step takes you further from the light. You want clarity without commitment, protection without submission, favor without faithfulness, but that's not how my kingdom operates. You've mistaken my patience for agreement. You thought because I stayed near, I also approve. But I am not a bystander to rebellion, I am a holy God, and I will not be used as a spiritual convenience. I gave you time to wake up, but now I must expose what happens when your choices are fully yours, untouched by my restraint. You wanted independence, I will let you feel its weight. You wanted control, I will show you how heavy it is to bear it without me. And when you see how fragile your life becomes when heaven is no longer intervening in the background, maybe then you will understand why I fought so hard for your yes. I'm not punishing you by stepping back, I am answering what your actions have requested over and over. I will not stand in the way of your decisions, because love without choice is not love at all. You've been warned, wooed, and surrounded by people sent to wake you, but you hardened your resolve and refused the invitation. Now I must pull back, not to abandon, but to let you feel what separation looks like in real time. This is not symbolic distance, it is the beginning of a visible shift. The peace you've taken for granted will grow quiet. The strength you didn't realize came from me will begin to fail. The protection you assumed was natural will weaken. I'm not doing this to harm you, I'm letting you experience what you've chosen. You've built a life without my presence as its foundation, and now the structure will be tested. Everything not built on me will shake. Everything not rooted in truth will wither. And still, even in this unveiling, my love remains, but I will not use it to shield you from the full picture anymore. You need to see the consequences of walking alone, because only in that wilderness will you recognize the poverty of a soul disconnected from its source. I'm not sending the destruction, but I will stop intercepting it. I've intercepted countless attacks you never saw. I've canceled the plans of the enemy before you ever prayed. I've stood in gaps you didn't even know existed. But now, because you insist on walking your own path, I must let you face what I once blocked. And still, this is love, uncomfortable, piercing love. A love that refuses to let you stay asleep in false safety. A love that allows pain if it leads you back to truth. My silence from this point forward is not absence, it's permission. Permission for you to see the life you've been choosing without interference. And when you finally realize what it means to walk without my whisper, my presence, my protection, I will still be waiting if you return. But I will not beg anymore. I will not nudge. I will not continue delaying what must come. This is your unveiling. This is what it looks like when you try to live disconnected from the very breath that sustains you. And I will not intervene unless I see surrender, not just tears, but true turning. Because until you stop clinging to your own way, you will never understand why I was crying through the storm. And now, my child, you must see for yourself what it means to walk this road without me at your side. I never desired to dominate your will or override your decisions, because love that is forced is not love, it's captivity, and I came to set captives free, not create more. I waited because I wanted your yes to rise from a place of deep recognition, not desperation. But now, as the weight of time collapses around your indecision, I must withdraw my restraint from what I've been holding back, not because I want harm to come, but because I cannot continue shielding you while you insist on ignoring my presence. You cry for change but resist transformation. You beg for peace while feeding chaos. And I have watched, not with indifference, but with aching patience, as you drifted further with every tomorrow you spoke in my direction. My voice was never meant to compete with your schedule or your preferences. I am not an option to be weighed, I am the very foundation you are denying yourself. I will not push myself into the place of authority in your life if you continually hand that place to fear, distraction, pride, or comfort. I knock, yes, but I do not break down the door. And since you have refused to open it with surrender, I will now honor your will and let the process unfold as it must. Not because I no longer love you, but because I refuse to cheapen that love by begging for a response that should have been offered freely. I've delayed the unveiling of consequences, not out of obligation, but out of mercy. But mercy has an expiration when the heart becomes hardened by too much delay. If I allowed this pattern to continue unchallenged, it would not be compassion, it would be cruelty. You need to feel the reality of what you've chosen in full weight. You need to know that the timeline you thought was flexible is collapsing while you casually look the other way. And I will not stand in the way of what's coming, not because I'm distant, but because you've made it clear you are not ready to walk in agreement. Your unwillingness cannot stop what I must release. I gave space for repentance, space for return, space for breakthrough, but when that space is abused, it becomes a stage where deception performs. And I am tearing down the stage now. I am allowing the illusions to fall apart. I am releasing what I have held back so that your soul might finally recognize how serious this truly is. No more delay. No more spiritual bargaining. No more negotiating partial obedience. You've waited for a sign and ignored the warnings. You've wanted confirmation but ignored the conviction. So now, I will no longer pause the unraveling that your decisions have attracted. The shaking will begin not to destroy you, but to dismantle everything you've trusted more than me. I will not compete with idols. I will not be treated as a backup plan. I will not sit silent while your destiny is sacrificed for comfort. The hour has arrived where what you allowed will begin to speak louder than what you intended. This moment is not about fear, it is about finality. It is the hour where what has been tolerated will be exposed, and I will not interfere unless repentance is immediate and authentic. You cannot serve two masters and expect one to remain silent forever. I have waited. I have called. I have extended my hand. But now, what must be fulfilled will move forward, with or without your cooperation. Your name was called. Your heart was stirred. Your purpose was announced. But if you do not answer now, it will be reassigned to one who will. Because the harvest is ready, and I will not wait for those who refuse to rise. My presence is holy. My time is not yours to waste. I'm still here, but I am not delaying again. What must come next is already in motion, and you will either face it with me or feel it without me. You choose. Every moment you hesitated became an open invitation for what was never meant to touch your life. Your delay wasn't passive. It created a vacuum that darkness began to fill. While you told yourself you were thinking, processing, praying about it longer, the enemy was already working with your silence. He didn't need your permission. He only needed your postponement. The space where obedience should have been became a threshold for deception to enter quietly, unnoticed, disguised as harmless alternatives. What you tolerated became rooted. What you postponed began to multiply. The longer you stood still, the deeper the traps around you were hidden. You thought you had time, but time was never yours to manage. It was grace, being loaned to you moment by moment, and you spent it bargaining with eternity. You've allowed procrastination to become your comfort, but it has never been innocent. Every delay in surrender is a delay in protection. Every time you paused instead of yielding, you left an opening that cannot be closed with words alone. I am not warning you about future dangers. I am alerting you to what is already breathing at the threshold of your life. The things you thought you could manage, contain, or control are now preparing to demand ownership. The temptations you flirted with are now becoming strongholds. You saw the smoke, but you ignored it because the fire hadn't touched you yet. But now the flames are moving, and they are after what you still refuse to hand over. You don't realize how close you are to being consumed by what you once casually entertained. You thought delay was neutral. It's not. It's a choice, and that choice has consequences. You've said, I will give it up later, but darkness doesn't wait for your schedule. Hell moves fast when doors are left unguarded. You cannot keep standing in indecision and expect the storm to bypass you. This is not just a season. This is a spiritual battleground, and your delay is placing you in the line of fire. You weren't meant to live like this, afraid, double-minded, half-awake. I created you to walk in clarity, in authority, in freedom. But you have delayed your access by entertaining delay itself. And now, what was once a whisper is becoming a shout. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to rescue you from the false safety you've wrapped around yourself. This illusion of control will not hold much longer. You can't delay repentance and expect peace. You can't hesitate with obedience and expect covering. I have watched you come so close to full surrender, only to back away the moment it required cost. But everything worthwhile in the kingdom demands something in return, and the longer you delay giving me what I asked for, the more you risk losing what I designed for your life. You are standing on the edge of consequences that cannot be reversed once they are set in motion. This is not about punishment. This is about permission. You gave permission for darkness to remain every time you chose silence over surrender. And now, I must allow the pressure to rise so that your spirit awakens to what is truly unfolding. This is your last call to act, not think. To respond, not reason. You know what I'm asking. You've known for a long time. I'm not being unclear, you're being resistant. and that resistance has pulled danger closer than you intended. What began as hesitation is becoming devastation. You don't have the luxury of delay anymore. The hour demands decision. The moment demands motion. I will not drag you, but I will not wait endlessly while the enemy stakes ground I gave you authority over. What you do next will shift everything. I am speaking clearly because I love you too much to let you slip into ruin quietly. Don't say you weren't warned. Don't say you didn't know. You invited this danger through delay. Now break the cycle before it becomes your destruction. There has never been a moment I approached you without mercy leading the way. Every warning I gave you was wrapped in compassion, not condemnation. I didn't expose your failures to shame you. I revealed them so you could be set free from their grip. I covered you while you stumbled, not because you earned that covering, but because I wanted you to see how deeply I loved you even when you didn't love me back. Every time you ignored me, I still extended another breath, another opportunity, another open door. That wasn't coincidence. That was mercy on display, pleading with you to notice, to turn, to respond. But mercy has a season. It flows like a river. But when repeatedly rejected, it becomes a flood warning. You cannot drink from my kindness while denying me your loyalty. I watched as you treated my grace like a backup plan, available when needed, but neglected when inconvenient. But mercy, when continuously rejected, turns into the very thing you feared most, a silence you cannot reverse. You assume my patience meant indifference, but it was simply restraint. I waited not because you were entitled to time, but because I wanted you to choose me before the weight of consequences forced you to. I did not delay because I was unsure. I delayed because I was giving you every chance to change course before the storm matured. And now, you are no longer standing in untested grace. You are walking in the residue of missed moments, and that residue is attracting judgment. Not the kind born from wrath, but the kind birthed from mercy left unanswered too long. You made light of what should have made you tremble. You explained away what should have driven you to your knees. I gave you night after night with conviction heavy on your chest, and you called it stress. I sent you dreams to warn you, but you dismissed them as your mind playing tricks. You've treated my voice like background noise in your pursuit of everything else. And now I must let you taste the void that forms when mercy stops standing in the way. This is not me giving up. This is me allowing you to face what you kept inviting while ignoring the way out I repeatedly placed in front of you. You said, God understands my heart. And yes, I do. And that's exactly why I can no longer allow you to abuse what I intended to restore. I saw the pride that masked itself as pain. I heard the excuses spoken with soft tones, but rooted in rebellion. And I let mercy continue flowing, hoping that one moment would finally break you open. But instead of breaking, you built stronger walls. You started to believe that because judgment didn't come swiftly, it wouldn't come at all. But I'm not bound to your timing. I'm not moved by performance. I move when it's time, and now, time has reached its border. What happens next is not a result of me abandoning you. It is the result of you repeatedly walking away from the very help that could have changed everything. Mercy stood in front of judgment like a shield, but now it steps aside, not in anger, but in necessity. You cannot ignore heaven and still demand protection from hell. You cannot reject instruction and abstain condemned from gradient. I say this with trembling love. You are out of time to delay. You are no longer safe in your indecision. What you refused to receive in mercy will now reach you through pain. And when it does, do not ask where I went. I was there again and again, but you chose silence over surrender. Now the silence will echo back your choices, and the echoes will sound a lot like judgment. You gave me pieces, fragments offered on your terms, in moments that suited your emotions or your schedule. But I never asked for portions. I asked for your whole heart. I didn't come seeking surface worship or momentary affection that fades as quickly as it rises. I came for the center of your being, the place where decisions are born, where loyalty is forged, where your true motives live, the place you keep guarded while pretending you're fully mine. You've given me the songs but withheld the surrender. You've given me your voice but kept your desires hidden behind locked doors. I never wanted your performance. I wanted intimacy. And yet, when the pull of the world demanded your attention, I watched you give your strength to everything but me. You carve out time for distractions and people who could never carry your soul. Yet when it came to me, I was treated as an afterthought. Your convenience became the altar where you sacrificed obedience. You obeyed when it felt good, when it lined up with your plans, when it didn't ask you to let go of comfort or familiarity. But that's not love, that's control wearing a religious disguise. I searched you for depth, but you stayed on the surface. I waited in the secret place, but you sent me your leftovers. You wore my name around others, but behind closed doors your affections were divided, and I do not dwell in divided places. I called you to walk closely, but you settled for visits, brief moments when your conscience stirred or your emotions flared. I whispered promises, but you countered with conditions. I'll follow if became the language of your response. But I don't respond to if. I respond to yes. A yes that doesn't check for convenience. A yes that isn't postponed by fear or filtered through logic. A yes that is raw, sacrificial, real. I saw you reading truth but refusing to let it pierce. I watched as conviction rose like fire in your chest, only to be doused with distraction and delay. And I must say this plainly now, your partial offering is no longer accepted. I am not moved by noise. I am not looking for a moment of spiritual emotion followed by days of compromise. I want your attention, your loyalty, your affection, not when it fits, but especially when it costs. Because it is in the cost that true worship is found. I'm not impressed by your ability to repeat my words. I'm looking at the space where your choices are made. That space still resists me. That space still clings to comfort more than to me. You say you love me, but love is not measured by words alone. It is seen in where your loyalty lands when it's inconvenient. It's revealed when sacrifice is required. And for too long, you've convinced yourself that casual commitment is enough. But I never died for convenience, I died for covenant. You don't understand what you're risking by offering me a divided heart. You think it's small, but it is the very thing that determines the course of your life. A heart half-turned cannot carry the weight of my purpose. A soul that reserves space for idols cannot host my fullness. I cannot pour out where compromise still reigns. And now, I am searching again, asking once more, will you finally surrender all, not just what's easy? Will you finally stop measuring your offering and pour everything out before me without calculation? This is no longer about feelings, it's about obedience. It's about trust. I don't want a place in your heart. I want the throne. And if I cannot have it, then what you give me will never be enough. This is your moment to break the illusion that you can serve me halfway. This is your time to finally say, take it all. Because if I do not have your whole heart, then I will not compete for the rest. You watched as days turned into years and assumed that because judgment didn't fall, I must not really mean what I said, but my delay was never apathy, it was hope. I waited with open arms, not because I lacked power, but because I longed for your heart to come back to me willingly. You saw me wait, and instead of turning with reverence, you turned with disregard. You mistook my holding back for hesitation, not realizing that every second of silence was soaked in intercession, that each breath you took outside my will was permitted by mercy stretching itself one more inch. My patience was not weakness, child. It was warfare. I fought to give you time. I battled unseen forces to hold the line longer, even when your actions gave them rights to advance. I extended seasons you didn't deserve, praying your spirit would finally soften. But instead of coming home, you walked further, as if grace was an endless rope you could tangle around your own desires. I let the sun rise when you had no intention of praying. I allowed favor to reach you in places you did invite me into. I placed my hand over plans that weren't mine, not to endorse them, but to prevent them from destroying you prematurely. And still, you interpreted that as approval. You believed the blessings meant I was fine with your distance. But child, blessings can flow from brokenness, not because I endorse rebellion, but because I know what's ahead, and I was buying you time. Do not confuse provision with partnership. I blessed you for your future, not for your current posture. You thought my silence was permission, but it was pleading. I was hoping you would look past your schedule and notice the stillness, hoping you would pause long enough to realize something eternal was pressing on your chest. I let you keep your routine, your platform, your voice, not because I was impressed, but because I saw the real you behind all of it, and I was waiting for that version to emerge. But time has run its course, and I will not allow you to misread my restraint any longer. This is not the season for misinterpretation. This is the season of unveiling. The space between what you say and what you live in is narrowing. The atmosphere is shifting, and the illusion that my patience means passivity is being shattered. I gave you so much space, not because I am lenient about sin, but because I wanted you to see that love waits, that heaven doesn't give up easily. But now, that wait is ending. Now, the reality of what's been neglected will begin to surface. You will no longer be able to function in partial devotion and not feel the weight of distance. I will no longer let you confuse extended grace with indifference. You didn't understand how many times I stepped in between you and consequence. You didn't see the moments when I spoke your name in the midnight hour, even when you hadn't spoken mine in weeks. And I did all of it not out of obligation, but out of relentless desire to bring you back. I hoped for your return not because I needed you to complete me, but because I created you to reflect me, and you've become unrecognizable to what I designed. I hope your heart would shift before the pressure did. I waited for you to respond to kindness, not catastrophe. But you chose delay as your language, and now, what was once held back will begin to break forward. The space I made for repentance is closing, and what comes next is not the result of my absence, it is the echo of your resistance. My patience wasn't weakness. It was the last line before the shaking began. You called them inconveniences, setbacks, misfortune, but I called them mercy. I intervened in ways you didn't ask for because I saw what you couldn't, and I love you too much to let you proceed unchallenged. Every closed door, every last-minute shift, every unraveling plan was orchestrated to slow you down before you walked into something you weren't prepared to survive. But rather than pause and seek me, you rushed to fix what I purposely allowed to break. You resented the interruption without asking who was trying to speak through it. I didn't block your path because I'm cruel. I did it because your next step would have taken you further away from what I created you for. I delayed relationships that would have drained you, redirected opportunities that would have stolen your focus, and allowed conflict to shake you because comfort was sedating you. Yet you responded with irritation instead of intercession. You tried to force open doors that I had shut with divine intention, and in doing so, you began to confuse resistance with failure, when in truth, it was a rescue. You didn't see how that lost opportunity was a lifeline. You couldn't feel how that disappointment was protection dressed as pain. You labeled my interventions as interference and rushed to restore what I dismantled for your safety. And every time I reached out to break the rhythm that was killing your spirit, you doubled down on your routine instead of kneeling in surrender. I disrupted your comfort because it was choking your calling. I shook your plans because they were never aligned with the blueprint of your purpose. But you ran from discomfort, not realizing discomfort was the only thing that could still get your attention. You wrapped frustration around your soul instead of faith, and you made your delays about failure instead of revelation. But I didn't stop things to punish you. I stopped them to awaken you. There were moments when you were inches away from destruction, and I quietly rearranged circumstances without your knowledge. I caused systems to fail, people to back away, and timing to collapse, not to leave you stranded, but to bring you to your knees. But instead of falling into me, you fell into distraction. Instead of seeking understanding, you sought alternatives. You chased new solutions when I was trying to remove what you never should have depended on. And now, I speak plainly. Those disruptions were not the enemy. They were me. They were not random. They were designed. Every delay was time I bought for your soul to breathe again. Every detour was an invitation to walk a different way, one that didn't end in compromise. But now, because you ignored the signs, I will no longer soften what must shake. I will not keep rerouting you if you are determined to reach a place I never sent you. If you insist on building around what I tried to dismantle, I will remove my hand and let you feel the weight of your own plans. I've been gentle long enough. I've spoken through subtle winds, through rearranged moments, through canceled plans and unexpected exits. But since you refuse to see my fingerprints in those details, I will step back and let you follow your own path, and when you realize it doesn't lead where you thought, I pray you remember that I tried to save you quietly first. I won't chase what refuses to stop. I won't interrupt what continually calls my interruptions an attack. I am a God of mercy, yes, but I am also a God of order. And I will not let disorder disguise itself as destiny in your life any longer. You ignored the detours. You bypassed the blocks. You played through the moments that were meant to protect you. And now you will face the outcome of a route I never approved. I am still near, but I will no longer hold back what you insisted on walking toward. You saw destruction. I was offering direction. But now the choice is fully yours, and so are the consequences that follow. The barrier I once placed around you, invisible but impenetrable, is beginning to lift, not out of vengeance, but because you've chosen distance over dependence. You thought the lack of calamity meant you were secure, but it was I who shielded you from battles you never even saw coming. You didn't recognize how many traps I disarmed, how many weapons I dismantled before they reached you, how many accusations I silenced before they could touch your name. But since you've made it clear through your choices that my presence is optional, I will now let you experience what it means to live without my intervention. The storm isn't new. It was always there. You just couldn't feel it because I stood between you and the blow. But now, the storm will touch you. And not because I desire your ruin, but because you have rejected my protection long enough to render it ineffective. This is not abandonment. This is consequence. This is what happens when grace is disregarded and covenant is neglected. I was never your assistant. I am your Lord. I don't follow your plans. I lead those who follow me. And when you cease to walk under my authority, you step outside the shelter I built for you. My hand was not just comfort. It was defense. And now, with it lifted, you'll begin to see how fragile the world becomes when my presence is no longer guarding the gates. The conversations that once faded before becoming rumors, now they will echo. The attacks that used to turn away at the last second, now they will land. The unrest you once shook off will now grow louder, heavier, more constant. And I don't say this to scare you, but to awaken you to reality. The peace you felt wasn't your doing. It was my nearness. The clarity you enjoyed wasn't from your wisdom. It was my spirit illuminating your mind. And now, you will see what it means to navigate without that clarity. The decisions you used to make with ease will now be clouded. The confidence you had will shrink. The strength you thought was your own will quickly unravel. I'm not doing this to torment you. I'm allowing what was always being held back to finally be felt. Because maybe pain will reach you where peace couldn't. Maybe collapse will speak to you where quiet conviction failed. I'm not stepping away to be cruel. I'm stepping away to let you taste the absence you've become comfortable living in. The scary part is, you won't notice right away. It will start subtly, a little more confusion here, a little more fatigue there. A creeping anxiety that no entertainment can shake. A sense of exposure, like something has shifted but you can't put your finger on it. That's how it begins, the fading of covering. And as it progresses, your strength will diminish, not because I'm punishing you, but because I can no longer reinforce what is built in rebellion. I only sustain what is surrendered. If you continue down this path, you will encounter forces that once trembled at my presence, but now approach with boldness, because they see you unguarded. I fought them off for you before, but now you must choose whether to invite me back or attempt to withstand them alone. Do not confuse what's coming as divine rejection. See it clearly. It is a response to prolonged disobedience. I do not force myself upon anyone, and I do not offer protection to those who refuse to walk under my authority. If you want my covering again, you must return to me, not halfway, not with delay, but completely, immediately. Because what's arriving does not wait for your comfort. The enemy doesn't pause while you debate. And I will not stand between you and destruction if you continue standing apart from me. I gave you so many chances. But now, you will walk into the world you insisted on having, one where my hand no longer hides you from what your rebellion drew in. When you feel exposed, remember, I didn't remove my covering. You stepped out from under it. It's not that I stopped speaking, it's that you stopped listening. You let noise become your counsel and influence become your instruction. You no longer wait for my whisper because you've allowed louder, faster, more flattering voices to occupy the space where I used to dwell. They speak often, and they speak confidently, but they do not carry truth. They carry opinions, preferences, and confusion wrapped in spiritual language. And while they built platforms, I waited on the sidelines of your heart for a moment of silence that never came. You scroll through voices that feed your appetite, but starve your discernment. You trust voices that affirm your delay instead of confronting your drift. I was once the first voice you turned to, the one you cried out to in quiet moments, but now I'm buried beneath layers of distractions you've baptized as purpose. You replaced conviction with affirmation, and in doing so, you traded clarity for chaos. When you began to ignore my leading, your ears adjusted to what pleased you, not what prepared you. And now, you find yourself surrounded by noise that comforts your compromise but cannot guide your calling. You've mistaken quantity of voices for quality of truth. You've surrounded yourself with sound, but you're starving for direction. I am the shepherd, and my sheep know my voice. But you've dulled your sensitivity by continually entertaining what I never sent. I'm not angry because you're confused. I'm grieved that you've stopped asking me what's real. You quote me, but you don't consult me. You speak my name, but you don't wait for my answer. And that's why the voices you've embraced have grown louder. They fill the silence that was meant for me. You've lost your ability to discern because you no longer create space for me to shape your thoughts. I didn't stop showing up. You stopped showing reverence. You treat every opinion as equal, every emotion as truth, and every trend as wisdom. But not every voice is from me, and not every message is anointed. You're in danger because you can no longer tell the difference. What once sounded off-key now sounds familiar, and what once grieved your spirit now entertains your soul. This isn't because I've gone silent. It's because you've filled your life with so much volume that my voice can no longer break through. You need to understand something deeply. Not all revelation is holy, and not all inspiration leads to life. You open yourself to voices that use my name but carry no intimacy with me, and you've given them authority over your direction. I wept as you replaced my spirit's guidance with the noise of culture disguised as Christian counsel. I watched as you swallowed half-truths and built theology around your wounds instead of my word. And now, when I speak, you second-guess it, because the counterfeit has become more comfortable than the true. I will not compete with the crowd. I will not wrestle with voices you prefer because they let you stay where you are. If you want me to speak again, you must silence what isn't sent. You must cleanse the atmosphere around your heart and strip away every influence that numbs your hunger for my truth. Until then, the confusion will deepen. The fog will thicken. Not because I want you lost, but because you've stopped following the light that was meant to lead you. I will not shout to get your attention. I never needed volume. I needed reverence. If you keep filling your ears with everyone else, you will eventually forget what I sound like altogether. That's what the enemy is counting on, that you would stay so full of noise that you no longer notice my absence. But child, I never stopped calling. You just tuned me out. And now, If you want to hear me again, you will have to silence everything else and choose me, not just as a voice, but as the only voice that truly matters. You've surrounded yourself with pleasures that leave you hollow, consuming words that flatter your emotions but never feed your spirit. You reach for whatever fills your time, your ears, your hands, but nothing satisfies, and still you return to the same empty wells expecting something to change. I have watched you feast on noise, trends, shallow affirmations, and emotional highs that vanish the moment real pressure hits. These things cannot sustain you, but you continue devouring them because they are familiar. And now your spirit is weak, your discernment is blurry, and you wonder why your peace keeps disappearing. It's because you're feeding a soul designed for glory with things that have no weight, no truth, no substance. You're full in all the wrong ways, bloated with opinions, entertainment, distractions, and empty spiritual phrases that sound good but carry no fire. I have prepared a table of depth, of revelation, of presence, but you've ignored it for snacks that require no sacrifice. You consume messages that never confront your heart, music that numbs your conviction, and voices that validate your apathy, and you've grown used to the feeling of starvation because you've normalized superficial nourishment. You say you're fine because you're not falling apart, but survival is not the same as strength. You've learned to function while malnourished. You've mastered the art of appearing filled while your inner man withers. You were never meant to live like this, always searching, always reaching, always chasing highs that fade before they heal. I didn't design you to live on sugar-coated lies or watered-down comfort. I built your soul to crave me, my voice, my truth, my presence. But because you've consumed so many substitutes, you've confused hunger with irritation and fullness with numbness. You scroll for relief and find nothing that lasts. You listen for meaning, but it evaporates before it reaches your spirit. I see it. The fatigue behind your smile, the tension beneath your productivity, the ache that whispers late at night when everything is quiet but your thoughts. That ache is your soul crying out for the one it was created to know. That void is not depression, distraction, or personality. It is the echo of separation. You've kept yourself entertained, but not engaged. Stimulated, but not surrendered. Informed, but not transformed. And I must tell you this. Until you return to me and let me reintroduce you to real food, you will continue this cycle of craving what will never satisfy. You need truth that breaks you open. You need fire that purifies, not just words that pacify. You need the weight of my presence more than you need another encouraging quote. My table is still set, but it requires that you push aside every plate filled with lesser things. You can't eat from both altars, mine and the world's. You can't take bites of truth while sipping from the cup of compromise. You are spiritually anemic, and what you call being tired is actually your soul calling out for my voice again. I am the bread of life, and what I give you will not spoil. I am the living water, and what I offer won't run dry. But you must come empty to be filled. You must stop pretending you're nourished and admit the emptiness inside. Because until you do, you will keep feasting on what is poisoning your spirit slowly. The enemy doesn't have to destroy you if he can just keep feeding you enough lies to make you spiritually sleepy. But I'm waking you up now. I'm calling you back to the table you walked away from. You don't need more options, you need me. Not once a week, not when it's convenient, but daily, deeply, desperately. Because what's coming won't be survived by those who snack on truth. It will only be endured by those who are rooted, grounded, and filled with me. So I ask you, will you finally push away every plate that leaves you starving and return to the feast that was prepared just for your soul? You have guarded the very things that are tearing you away from me, shielding them from my reach as if they were sacred, while neglecting the sacred space where I once dwelled in your heart. You defend your habits, your preferences, your patterns, and your possessions with more passion than you defend your faith. You excuse compromise to protect your comfort. You justify distractions because they've become familiar. And every time I've tried to speak into those areas, you've called me invasive. But child, I'm not trying to rob you. I'm trying to rescue you. I've watched you pour affection, time, and loyalty into things that never bled for you, never wept for you, never knew your name before you gave them your soul. They promise status, security, pleasure, or escape, but none of them carry eternal weight, and still, you clutch them as if they are your lifeline. And what breaks me is this. I remember when it was me you ran to. I remember when my presence was enough. I remember when you did measure what you gave me. You just gave it. But now I see you protecting your idols like fragile bonds, afraid that if you let go, you will fall apart. But it's not you who will fall. It's the lie you've built around them that will collapse. I've warned you not because I'm jealous in a human way, but because I am holy. I will not be one name among many. I will not be added to your life like decoration while your heart worships convenience and applause. I am not an accessory to your lifestyle. I am the author of your life. And I will not compete for your attention with what you secretly serve. You've given me lip service while your affections are bound to screens, people, routines, platforms, and addictions you refuse to confront. You've built altars out of entertainment, obsession, relationships, money, and self-image, and then asked me to bless them. But I do not bless rebellion disguised as relevance. I do not smile over idols wearing Christian language. I have called you to be separate, not blended. I've called you to be holy, not halfway. But your heart has become a temple cluttered with things I never placed there. You pray for me to come closer, but I cannot fill a space already overflowing with your preferences. If I am truly Lord, then those things must bow. If I am truly King, then no idol can remain standing. I have been patient as you wrestled, but I will not stay silent as you defend what's destroying your intimacy with me. I've pointed them out. I've convicted you in quiet moments. I've made it uncomfortable to stay where you are, not to torment you, but to free you. But every time I came close to tearing down the idol, you stepped in to protect it. You said, "It's not that bad," or "I can handle it," or "Everyone does it." But I never called you to be like everyone. I called you to be mine. And now, the time of tolerating what competes with me is over. I will not speak where idols are louder. I will not dwell where I'm one of many loves. This is where the line is drawn. You will either destroy what's in my way, or I will remove my voice from that place in your life until you make room again. I am not cruel, I am consistent. I will not partner with divided affection. My glory does not rest where idols are honored. So choose today who you truly serve, because I will not fight for space that belongs to me by right. Tear down what offends my spirit, or feel what happens when I step back and let your idols prove they were never gods at all. I love you too much to share you, and I will not wait for you to decide if I'm worth everything, because I already decided you were, when I gave everything for you. But now, I must reveal to you how much you've taken for granted. I was the one who placed breath in your lungs while you ran from me. I covered your home from dangers you never saw coming. I steadied your steps when you didn't realize the ground beneath you was crumbling. I pushed back attacks that were scheduled to ruin you before you even knew there was a battle. You did not request those mercies. I gave them freely, because I have always loved you beyond your understanding. When you were busy chasing your own version of success, I was in the shadows rerouting what would have broken you. When others spoke against you, I stood in the courts of heaven silencing accusations you didn't even hear. When you felt peace, but gave credit to your strategy, it was my spirit surrounding you like a wall of fire. I gave you opportunities that had nothing to do with your qualifications. I opened doors that your name alone could never unlock. And I did it not for applause, but because I wanted you to know me, not just as savior, but as sustainer. You thought it was your hustle that brought increase, your instincts that protected you, your charisma that kept the room turning in your favor. But all along, it was me, working behind the curtain, extending favor when you didn't deserve it, standing in your tomorrow before you even prayed. I whispered instructions that spared you from loss. I aligned people and timing so precisely that you called it luck. But I was never lucky, I was intentional. And I didn't wait for your perfection before I showed you kindness. I moved before you moved. I forgave before you confessed. I stood near even when you walked far. But now my love must look different. Not because it changed, but because you become numb to its form. You've grown so used to unexpected blessings that you expect them without relationship. You've allowed comfort to blind you from the giver behind the gifts. You say thank you with your mouth, but your life doesn't reflect gratitude. It reflects entitlement. And entitlement cannot coexist with intimacy. So now, I will stop covering what you won't acknowledge. I will step aside where you assume I'll always step in. Not because I love you less, but because I will no longer fuel your delusion that blessings equal alignment. They don't. I've blessed many in rebellion, not to endorse them, but to expose their heart. I've protected people in distance, not because I condone their choices, but because I was giving them a chance to return before correction arrived. And you, my beloved, are standing at that threshold. I've given more than you noticed. I've stayed longer than you realize. But the time for unreciprocated devotion has ended. I am not a silent partner to your lifestyle. I will not remain your secret source while you exalt other names, chase other paths, and build altars that exclude me. I gave without being asked, and you responded by assuming I always would. But now you must decide if I am worth following, even when it's not convenient, even when the blessings pause, even when the favor slows down. Because what's coming next will separate those who seek my face from those who only sought my hand. And when the overflow dries up for a season, you will discover if you were truly mine, or just visiting my presence when it served your plans. I am still the same, merciful, kind, powerful, but I will not keep you in comfort while your character decays. I would rather withhold what pleases you to protect what matters most, your eternity. And so now, I will no longer protect you from the consequences of ignoring me. I will not bless over disobedience. What was once covered in mercy will now be exposed in truth. I gave without asking. I loved without hesitation. But now I ask you plainly, will you love me when the gifts stop, or was your heart only mine when your hands were full? How many times did I make the atmosphere shift around you, hoping your spirit would recognize me? How often did your heart start racing in moments of quiet conviction, and instead of responding, you distracted yourself until the weight lifted? I didn't allow those moments to pass through your life by accident. They were intentional encounters, invitations into deeper obedience. But rather than enter, you stood at the threshold, calculating the cost. You sensed me in worship but refused to let go. You felt the urgency during messages, dreams, unexpected conversations. But each time, you reassured yourself that there would be another moment, a better time, a more convenient setting to surrender. But that someday you've been waiting for is becoming a wall, not a doorway. Hesitation may seem harmless to you, but to me, it is a loud declaration that your trust still has conditions. You want certainty before obedience, but I never promised that. I offered presence, not predictability. And in your delay, you are forming habits of resistance, not because you deny me with your words, but because your silence in response has grown louder than any verbal rebellion. I don't need you to say no to walk away. All I need is your continued indecision. And you've been living on the edge of obedience for too long, mistaking proximity to me as intimacy with me. But standing near the fire isn't the same as carrying the flame. I've sent warning after warning, not because I enjoy repetition, but because I hoped one would finally reach the part of you still undecided. The part that nods but never moves. The part that agrees but never acts. You have prayed for signs, and I sent them, not once but repeatedly. Through people you never expected. Through songs, scriptures, even silence. I stirred your spirit while you scrolled, while you drove, while you sat alone pretending not to feel the pressure building inside. You cannot say I've been unclear. You cannot tell me you weren't sure. What you lacked was not understanding. It was surrender. I've moved everything but your will, and now that stillness has become dangerous. Every time you pushed the urgency away, you taught your soul to wait, and now your delay has become its own master. You are no longer waiting on me. You're waiting on the version of surrender that costs you nothing. But that version does not exist. Obedience is never without a price. And the longer you hesitate, the more you trade destiny for delay. I've watched you resist even while pretending to consider. I've seen how you protect your right to postpone, even as the consequences inch closer. And now, your hesitation has put you at the doorstep of a moment you are not ready for. You've grown so used to ignoring conviction that you no longer tremble when I speak. And so now, I must act. Not to destroy you, but to disrupt the lie that there will always be more time. I am no longer waiting for you to feel ready. Readiness was never the requirement. Willingness was. And every time I extended an invitation, you counted the cost and chose comfort. But child, what you're protecting is not worth what you're losing. You're hesitating between life and death, between purpose and illusion, between covenant and convenience. And I cannot wait for you to make up your mind while your soul walks toward disaster. I love you too much to keep circling this mountain. I must draw the line now, not to force you, but to stop enabling your delay. You have enough signs. You've heard enough truth. You've felt enough weight. This is no longer about information. It is about response. I'm standing in front of you, not with another explanation, but with a final call. Stop hesitating. Because one more delay may cost you what you will never be able to recover again. What you're about to experience is not rejection from heaven. It's what life begins to feel like when you repeatedly refuse to draw near. You may still hear my name, still see people worshiping, still feel moments of inspiration, but you will notice something hollow beneath it all, not because I left, but because you insisted on living without me in the center. You've treated my nearness as optional, like a spiritual convenience, expecting me to remain available while you continue turning your heart in every other direction. But I never promised to stay where I'm not honored. And though I have been long-suffering, that space of quiet protection you once knew is now lifting, not out of punishment, but because I will no longer hold the place you continually refuse to give. I'm not withdrawing love. I'm removing the illusion that proximity can exist without pursuit. You can no longer claim to walk with me while your steps are directed by everything else but my voice. So I will let you feel what that separation truly means. Not because I enjoy your discomfort, but because you've grown numb to conviction, and sometimes pain is the only thing left that can break through your stubborn resistance. You have sung songs about my presence, but your decisions tell another story. You chase emotional highs and call it encounter, but your daily life avoids me at every level. So now, I'm letting you feel the silence that comes when you no longer bring me into your moments. I will not keep making space in your life when you refuse to clear the idols. You'll begin to sense it not in a dramatic moment, but in a slow fading. A heaviness you can't explain. A sense of wandering even when surrounded by people. A quiet ache that no distraction can resolve. That emptiness is not abandonment. It's exposure. Exposure to the void you've unknowingly accepted as normal. I never meant for you to become so familiar with distance that you mistook it for peace. But now, you must finally see what you've been building without me, and it will not stand. Your structure looked solid from the outside, but without my breath, it is lifeless. And because you've ignored my instruction, I will no longer reinforce what was built in disobedience. I'm letting the cracks show now, not to shame you, but to save what's left before it all collapses. I've waited quietly but not passively. I've watched your decisions unfold, hoping you would come back before the shaking started. But every delay hardened your resolve. Every excuse silenced my invitation. And now, I must stop waiting for a response that never comes. You've convinced yourself that you're fine, that you're still close to me. But you're living off memories of old intimacy, and memory cannot replace movement. I need more than acknowledgement. I require surrender. And since your lips still speak while your heart remains distant, I will let you experience what happens when my covering lifts. You'll still be breathing, still functioning, but the deep connection you once felt will be gone, not because I moved away, but because I honored your decision to walk on without me. This is not a door slamming in anger. It's the slow closing of a gate that was never meant to stay open forever. You thought the space between us would always remain the same, but spiritual drift always leads somewhere. And now, you are arriving. I am still calling, but it will not sound the same. My voice will now feel unfamiliar, not because it changed, but because you stopped recognizing it. And in this silence, I pray you awaken. In this distance, I pray you finally miss me, not the blessings, not the atmosphere, not the comfort, but me. Because when you finally realize that everything else fades and fails, you'll know I was the only one who remained, waiting to be chosen, not tolerated. This is not the end, but it is the place where your delay finally begins to echo. And in the sound of that echo, I will wait one more time, not standing in front of you, but letting you decide if the emptiness will drive you back to where you belong. For too long, I've tried to reach you with tenderness, through the warmth of conviction, through the quiet nudge of my spirit, through moments so subtle they were easy to miss. But you didn't just miss them, you ignored them. You brushed off those interruptions as emotional flickers, convincing yourself they could wait. And now, because your ears have grown comfortable tuning me out, I must speak in a language that doesn't rely on your willingness to listen. Consequence. You didn't want to hear me in the stillness, so now you will encounter me in the unraveling. Not because I enjoy your hardship, but because you've made it the only environment where you even begin to ask questions. You turned from instruction, so now I must let discipline step in and deliver what words no longer can. My hands are not bringing destruction, but they are releasing restraint. And what enters that vacuum isn't random. It's the very result of what your decisions invited in. Every ignored correction becomes a seed, and seeds grow, whether you believe in them or not. The fruit that's about to appear didn't arrive overnight. It was planted in the soil of resistance, watered with delay, and now it is time to reap. You hoped my mercy would cancel every harvest, but grace does not erase what rebellion repeatedly nurtures. You've grown so used to being rescued that you forgot repentance is required. You banked on forgiveness while avoiding the very act of turning away from what grieves me. But I will not allow this distortion to remain in your life. I am not a lifeguard who pulls you from waves you swim into on purpose, again and again. I am a father who disciplines those he loves, not to wound, but to warn. And now, I'm warning with silence, with exposure, with open consequences that will begin to form around your daily life. The things that once came easily will now carry resistance. The clarity you once had will begin to blur. You'll try to shake it off like before, but this time, it won't lift. Because you can't move forward pretending nothing's wrong when your soul is leaking. And this leak won't be patched by distractions or busyness. It will only worsen until you stop and face what I've been trying to show you for years. Your life has been built around the idea of me, not submission to me. You like the feeling of peace, but you never let me become your foundation. And now, I will let the instability prove it. You will feel it in your relationships, in your inner atmosphere, in your thought patterns, not because I've cursed you, but because the scaffolding you trusted more than me is beginning to fall. I am letting it fall. I must. Because if I don't, you'll keep living under the illusion that everything is fine, while your heart slides further from truth. You've been living off borrowed time and mistaken it for favor. But borrowed time eventually runs out. And now, you will encounter the reality of life without covering, not to destroy you, but to confront what sweet words failed to awaken. This is your interruption. This is me drawing the line where you thought I would stay forever waiting behind you. I'm still here, but I'm no longer softening what you refused to receive gently. I'm no longer shielding you from the impact of your own drift. I love you too much to keep whispering into deaf ears. So now, the sound you hear will not be my whisper. It will be the echo of your own decisions growing louder. And in that echo, I will be waiting, not with folded arms, but with eyes full of longing not for your performance, but for your return. But I will not chase anymore. If love could have changed you, it would have by now. So I will let the consequences finish what my kindness began. You cried out for liberty, but in your heart, you craved a version of freedom that allowed you to remain unchanged. You weren't asking me to break chains, you were asking me to ignore them. You wanted the benefits of my name without the boundaries of my lordship. You called it grace, but what you desired was permission. You held tightly to your independence, not understanding that true freedom only exists under my rule. You pushed back against my leadings because they threatened the areas you still wanted to manage on your own. You asked me to be your rescuer but refused to make me your ruler. And because you confused obedience with oppression, you redefined surrender as loss instead of life. But I never called you to be free by the world's standards. I came to break you out of cycles that you secretly grown to love, patterns that make you feel powerful, even as they drain your soul. I offered you the kind of freedom that requires you to release your own throne, and that's the one you didn't want. You called me Lord, but you clung to your will. You worshipped with your mouth, but your plans remained untouched. And now you stand at a crossroads where what you built without me will soon demand more than you intended to pay. The version of control you thought would empower you is becoming a prison, one decision at a time. The illusion that you could lead your own life and still receive my covering is starting to collapse. I was never interested in partial rulership. I don't share authority with your ambition, your feelings, or your fear. I don't co-lead your destiny with your preferences. If I'm not all, I will not be anything at all. And now, I will let you see what happens when you attempt to carry a life that was designed to be surrendered. Your arms will grow tired. Your mind will grow restless. You'll chase new goals, but they'll satisfy less and less. You'll experience momentary wins followed by deeper emptiness. Not because I've cursed your efforts, but because I've removed my hand from what I never signed. You thought freedom was about auctions, but the freedom I bring is about alignment. You thought being free meant you could choose what parts of me to follow. But true freedom only begins when you no longer argue with my commands. I'm not trying to restrict you. I'm trying to release you from the burdens you were never meant to bear, the pressure to perform, the anxiety of being your own provider, the weight of pretending you're okay when you're barely holding on. But until you lay down control, I can't step in. Until you let go of your plan, I won't force mine upon you. You've kept me on the margins, asking me to support what I never authored. And now, the time has come to see the result of that divided loyalty. You will no longer be able to hold both, control and peace. You will no longer be able to cling to your way and expect me to bless it. I am not the God of compromise. I am the God of covenant. And covenant doesn't ask for your convenience. It demands your life. I've waited for you to realize this on your own, but your delay has turned dangerous. You're trying to steer a ship you weren't built to captain, and the storm ahead will prove it. I'm not trying to break you. I'm offering to rebuild you. But I cannot begin until you stop pretending that your version of freedom is working. It's not. It's breaking you from the inside out. And now, I must step back and let the cracks show. I won't cover what you idolize. I won't stabilize what you refuse to surrender. You asked for freedom. I'm showing you where it begins, at the point where your will ends. Until then, you'll continue calling it liberty, while slowly realizing it's been bondage all along. You've wandered so far into your own desires that you're now searching for me in places I never told you to go. You seek answers in the approval of people, validation through achievements, comfort in culture's language, all while ignoring the still place where I once met you. You hunger for confirmation but refuse the process of communion. You've asked for signs while neglecting scripture, waited for feelings while avoiding faith, and you wonder why everything feels quieter now. But I haven't changed. You've simply tuned your heart toward noise that reflects your will instead of mine. You're standing in rooms I never entered, listening to voices I never endorsed, placing your trust in titles and emotions rather than presence and truth. And while you've pursued the spectacular, you've neglected the sacred. I once walked closely beside you, but now your steps are determined by trends, by fears, by what's popular among the voices you've allowed to influence you. I whisper, but your ears are occupied. I draw near, but your gaze is fixed elsewhere. You don't even notice how far you've drifted because you've surrounded yourself with echoes of your own thoughts, mistaking familiarity for confirmation. You chase words that agree with your delay, sermons that never confront, atmospheres that excite without transforming. And you say you can't hear me, but it's not that I've stopped speaking. It's that you stopped submitting. You used to tremble at correction. Now you tolerate contradiction. You used to crave my presence. Now you crave applause. And I will not follow you into places where I'm treated like an option. I do not share space with idols, even when those idols are disguised as spiritual pursuits. I will not shout over what you've invited to speak louder than me. I will not compete with comfort or charisma or control. I am not a background voice in your personal narrative. I am the author. And when the story begins to bend in a direction I did not write, my voice will withdraw. Not because I'm punishing you, but because I've already warned you. And you chose to walk anyway. So now, you'll begin to feel what it's like to search for me in places I never sent you. The words you hear will grow vague. The clarity you once had will blur. Not because I want you confused, but because you insisted on filtering my instruction through your preferences. I will not repeat what you refuse to obey. I will not remain where you ignore what I've already made clear. And now, I must let your pursuits show their emptiness. I must allow you to climb the ladders you've built in your own strength, not to mock you, but to let you see the height is meaningless without me at the center. You've mistaken movement for growth, results for fruit, activity for anointing. But I measure differently. I measure depth. I measure obedience. I measure whether you sought me when it wasn't easy, whether you stayed rooted when no one was clapping, whether you still followed when the path stopped being exciting. And now, because you've turned your search elsewhere, I will stop sending whispers into rooms I never blessed. You cannot find my voice while running from my will. You cannot expect revelation while dodging surrender. If you want to hear me again, you must return to where you left me, not physically, but in posture, in hunger, in honesty. I have not abandoned you. I am simply standing still, waiting where you walked away. But I will not run after you forever. I will not plead for attention in a heart you've already promised to lesser things. I am patient, but I am not passive. I will not bless your rebellion with more words you don't intend to obey. I said what I meant. And now, if my voice seems distant, it's because you've walked too far into your own echo. You will not find me in pride. You will not hear me in rebellion. You will only encounter me again where you last bowed in truth. You've built your life around a false sense of margin, assuming there will always be more room, another day, another chance to respond. But time had been quietly closing in, not with noise, but with finality. You counted on tomorrow without realizing that every delay is not just a pause, it's a doorway closing slowly behind you. The future you imagined, the restoration you expected, the breakthrough you spoke about, they were never meant to be distant dreams. They were tied to decisions you've refused to make. And now, that delay has gained weight. Every moment you hesitated added pressure to your foundation, and now the cracks are beginning to form, not because I abandoned you, but because you ignored what I told you was urgent. I gave you windows to obey, but you stood still. I gave you instructions, but you negotiated. I gave you breath so you could move, but you chose analysis instead of action. And time, child, time is not under your control. It does not bend to your comfort. It does not expand around your fears. It keeps moving, and with it, so do opportunities. I am not a god of chaos, I am precise, ordered, intentional. When I speak, it is not to decorate your thoughts. It is to move you into alignment with what I've prepared. But you've mistaken my patience for permission to do nothing. You assumed the window would remain open while you entertained every other voice. But obedience delayed is not obedience. And now the moments you've wasted are becoming the barriers you must confront. You waited for signs, but the signs were always meant to follow your faith, not precede it. You kept hoping for a push when I already gave you the command. You prayed for confirmation, but deep down, you knew what I asked, and you stalled. Not because you were unsure, but because you didn't like what obedience would cost. But the time to debate is over. I will not stretch this moment into eternity for your convenience. I gave you room, not so you could remain in indecision, but so you could step forward before the weight of delay became irreversible. You see, some doors close slowly. They don't slam shut. They drift toward finality until they lock without sound. And now you are near one of those doors. This isn't fear. This is truth. The seasons shift not by emotion but by obedience. And where you stand now, what you decide next, will not just affect you. It will ripple into every connection tied to your calling. What you leave undone will impact more than just your own life. The people assigned to your obedience, they are waiting. And time is not waiting with them. There is an urgency on heaven's calendar that does not pause for personal hesitation. You wanted to wait until it felt right. You wanted more clarity, more comfort, more certainty. But obedience never starts with comfort. It starts with surrender. I did not ask you to understand everything. I asked you to trust me fully. But instead, you traded trust for timing. You convinced yourself you could obey later. But later has become a thief, and now it's robbing you of peace, joy, and direction. And I will not let you blame me for the outcomes that result from what you refuse to confront. This is your moment to stop pretending that indecision is harmless. It's not. It is slow disobedience, and disobedience has a price. The collapsing you feel in your atmosphere is not random. It's the echo of opportunities slipping away while you keep circling around old excuses. I still love you. I'm still near. But I will not pause what heaven has scheduled to accommodate your delay any longer. The time you thought you had was a gift, and gifts unwrapped in time become burdens. You must decide, now, if you will move with me, or if you will continue standing still while everything you were meant to step into begins to move without you. The mask you wear so carefully, the words you've rehearsed, the version of yourself you've shaped to satisfy people's expectations. It may have fooled them, but I see right through it. I've always seen the truth underneath the appearance. You know how to blend in, how to lift your hands at the right moment, how to say all the phrases that sound holy. But none of that reaches me if your heart isn't in it. I'm not moved by performance. I'm moved by authenticity. And now, the season of pretending is coming to a forced halt, because what has been hidden will soon be revealed, not by others, but by the weight of what's coming. You cannot carry duality into this next season. The pressure ahead will squeeze whatever is real to the surface. You can no longer afford to walk the line between surrender and self-preservation. You've dressed up rebellion in language that sounds spiritual. You've disguised avoidance with statements like "I'm praying on it," when you already know what I've told you to do. You've replaced transformation with appearances. And now I'm removing the stage you stood on. I'm pulling down the curtains of performance because the hour is too late to entertain shadows of devotion. I do not tolerate mixture, and your divided loyalty is no longer acceptable. You've polished your image while your intimacy with me has quietly deteriorated. But now, the pressure will expose what posture you've truly taken. When comfort fades, will you still call me Lord? When silence surrounds you, will you still trust what I said in the light? When everything you used to lean on begins to crumble, will your worship remain, or will it vanish with your convenience? These are not hypothetical questions. These are what you are about to face. And not because I want to break you, but because I want the real you to finally rise. A version I formed, not the one fear modified. The version that doesn't require applause. The version that doesn't collapse when things get quiet. I want your heart, not your routine, not your image, not your reputation. And if you keep hiding behind your church self while refusing to give me your actual self, I will let the fire come close enough to expose what you keep covering. Not to shame you, but to set you free. Because your soul hath been suffocating under this pretense. You've been exhausted trying to hold up a version of you that I never asked you to be. That's why your peace disappears so easy. That's why your strength feels drained even when you've done all the right things. You were never meant to live two lives. I called you to be one, whole, pure, and true. And now, I am removing the option to stay divided. I am collapsing the space between who you say you are and who you really are. Because this is the moment where truth matters more than comfort. If you will not expose it before me willingly, then your circumstances will. What you won't surrender will soon be shaken. What you refuse to confess will become weight. What you hide behind will fall, and when it does, your heart will be seen, and not by others but by me. I already know the truth, but I want you to stop denying it to yourself. Because I can only heal what you bring into the light. I can only restore what you stop pretending doesn't need help. So I say this not with anger, but with urgency. Drop the act. Drop the spiritual vocabulary that covers emptiness. Drop the facade that you've learned to wear so well. I am not impressed by your outward posture. I want your heart, even if it's broken, confused, weak, or wandering. Because I can work with honesty. I can transform surrender. But I will not pretend with you. And I will not let you pretend your way through what's coming next. Let the false fall away, and give me the part of you that actually wants me, not the one you've built to impress others. Because one way or another, your heart will speak. Let it speak now while there is still time to return. Every moment you postpone obedience, you unintentionally yield space to forces that do not belong in your life. Delayed surrender may feel passive to you, but in the spirit realm, it's active permission. You're not standing still, you're conceding territory. The longer you hesitate, the wider the breach becomes. You may not see it right away, but erosion always begins subtly. A crack here, a compromise there, a small decision that weakens your guard. And while you're convincing yourself you'll obey eventually, the enemy is building infrastructure inside the very ground you failed to occupy. You've underestimated what delay gives birth to. It breeds confusion. It invites deception. It welcomes cycles you thought were broken. And all of it traces back to doors that remained unlocked because you didn't close them when I asked you to. What you call waiting, the enemy calls opportunity. Every unspoken yes, every ignored nudge, every time you said, "Not yet," became an opening. Not just for distraction, but for strategic invasion. You're not simply behind schedule. You're fighting resistance that would have been avoided if obedience had been immediate. I'm not trying to condemn you. I'm trying to make you aware of how high the cost of hesitation really is. Spiritual territory is not neutral. It will be occupied, either by my presence or by forces that seek to dismantle what I've destined for you. And now, the enemy has grown bold, not because he's strong, but because your delay made him feel welcome. He cannot overpower you, but he thrives in the absence of your obedience. The authority I gave you is still yours, but authority without execution is empty. You keep asking me for breakthrough in areas where I've already given you instructions. But I cannot bless what you're unwilling to build. I cannot rebuke what you refuse to resist. If you want the atmosphere to shift, you must stop stalling in the places I've called you to rise. You've been praying for clarity, but it's not clarity you lack, it's commitment. The fog isn't confusion. It's the result of disobedience clouding what once was clear. I told you when to move. I whispered what to shut down. I sent conviction to confront the compromises. And you paused. You analyzed. You delayed. And in the pause, spiritual trespassers crept in. Now you feel overwhelmed. Not because I left you, but because your hesitation created traffic in places that should have been holy. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being prompt. When I speak, it's not for discussion, it's for alignment. And every time you postpone your yes, the enemy builds comfort where there should have been fire. You wonder why your prayer life feels dry. It's because warfare entered through the same gate where obedience should have stood. And now, I'm calling you to reclaim what your delay surrendered. Not with excuses, not with shame, but with urgency. Because I am not done with you, but I will not let you continue allowing the enemy to manage the space I entrusted to you. There's still time, but it's running out. There's still grace, but it's not indefinite. You need to wake up to the spiritual gravity of what's happening around you. What you delay in me creates demand for deliverance later. And I would rather you walk in prevention than cry out in desperation. Don't wait until you're surrounded to remember what I told you in secret. Don't wait until the storm grows louder than your excuses. Act now. Obey now. Move now. Seal every door. Remove every compromise. Reclaim every room. And watch how quickly peace returns when the ground is occupied by surrender. I'm not asking for more emotion, I'm asking for execution. Because every second matters, and every yes you've postponed has already started writing a chapter you were never meant to walk through. But you still have a choice. Take back what you gave up in delay. Stand where the enemy thought you were finished. And this time, don't wait. Don't hesitate. Don't calculate. Just obey, because the longer you delay, the more you empower what I already gave you authority to dismantle. You asked for a sign, and I gave it. Not once, not twice, over and over again. I sent reminders of my voice, markers in your journey that pointed you back to me. You thought they were coincidences, small moments, or random disruptions, but every one of them was a rescue disguised as inconvenience. I spoke through people you didn't expect, through interruptions you labeled as distractions, through conversations that shook you in places you didn't want to acknowledge. You prayed for confirmation, and I answered in ways so obvious your spirit flinched, but still, you resisted. I allowed certain doors to close so you would be forced to reconsider where you were heading. I permitted people to walk away, not to punish you, but to remove what was blocking your return. I whispered warnings in the quiet, and when you didn't listen, I let the volume rise through circumstances that broke what pride tried to protect. The pain that shook you was not meant to destroy you, it was my mercy, tearing down what stood between us. But instead of leaning in, you shut down. Instead of falling into me, you hardened. Even when I provided when you least deserved it, hoping your heart would soften, you took the blessing and walked further away. I've warned you in too many ways to count, not because I'm desperate, but because I'm merciful. And now, you are standing at the edge of consequence, and you can't claim you weren't given time. You can't say I left you in the dark. I lit up the path repeatedly, but you turned away every time it required you to leave something behind. You wanted me without losing what with killing your spirit. You wanted the reward without the repentance. And now I tell you plainly, the warnings will stop. I will not continue sending alarms into a heart that refuses to wake up. I will not spend eternity stretching my hand toward someone who keeps using my patience as an excuse to stay unchanged. I gave you the word. I gave you conviction. I gave you countless moments where your heart trembled, where the atmosphere shifted, where you knew deep down it was me calling. And now, I will not repeat myself. What I've spoken stands. What I've shown is clear. You no longer need another sign. You need to respond to what I've already said. You've built a tolerance to my voice by delaying your obedience. You've trained yourself to feel conviction without ever converting it into action. That's why the warnings feel quieter, not because I've stopped speaking, but because you've stopped moving. And now, to protect your future and preserve your soul, I must let the silence speak louder than my voice ever could. I don't want to watch you walk into collapse, but I will not prevent what you continually walk toward. I've redirected you too many times to count, but you turned every red light into a slow roll toward destruction. I've shouted through stillness, spoken through storms, begged through blessings, and you heard me, but you didn't respond. That is the danger, not ignorance, but refusal. And refusal cannot be pacified with religion or ritual. It must be met with repentance. I've used dreams to show you what's coming, and you called them strange. I sent people who spoke truth, and you brushed them off as too intense. I placed holy discomfort in your chest, and you labeled it stress. I've tried every method heaven allows, and now, I step back. Not out of apathy, but out of honor. I will not keep forcing mercy where it's no longer respected. You cannot tell me I didn't warn you. The signs were everywhere. You just refused to stop. And now, what happens next will not be because I abandoned you. It will be the result of you rejecting what could have saved you. And when it all begins to unravel, remember, I tried to stop it. I tried to pull you out. But you kept walking. You kept choosing delay over destiny. And now, the silence will prove how loud my warnings truly were. You were never meant to face the heat alone. I didn't promise to remove every trial, but I did promise to stand with you in it, to shield you from being consumed, to carry you when your strength failed. But time after time, you've stepped into battle without me, wearing your own armor, swinging your own sword, and expecting to come out unharmed. You run headfirst into situations I never authorized, and when the flames rise higher than you've anticipated, you cry out as if I sent you there. I never asked you to prove yourself. I never told you to carry that weight by yourself. But instead of waiting for my direction, you charge forward in pride, in impatience, in desperation to fix things on your own. You keep walking into fires that were never assigned to you, fueled by choices I tried to redirect, decisions I sent warnings about, relationships I asked you to release. And still, you went, assuming I'd show up anyway just because you attached my name to the journey. But I don't follow your footsteps, I lead them. And if you continue moving ahead without listening, I will let you feel the burn of disobedience. I don't do it to wound you. I do it because the pain you feel in your missteps will teach you what my voice was trying to protect you from. I wept when you stepped into those flames. I reached to pull you back. I stirred your spirit, disrupted your plans, tried to block your access, but you forced your way in. And now you're scorched by the fallout of what your pride disguised as purpose. You thought boldness meant going fast, but boldness is obedience and not recklessness. You keep telling yourself you're being strong, but true strength is found in surrender, not in stubborn motion. I long to walk with you through this. I had strategy prepared, timing set, outcomes already written. But you were too eager to control, too afraid of waiting, too addicted to being seen as capable. And so you stepped ahead of me, carrying a weight I never asked you to bear. I would have been your covering in that furnace. I would have been your clarity in that chaos. But instead, you chose independence and called it faith. Now you're tired, burned, confused, not because I didn't come through, but because you didn't wait for me to move. You cried for relief, but ignored the route I laid before you. You asked for victory, but fought battles I never called you to. And I must tell you the truth. If you keep stepping into fires without my direction, I will let you experience the full heat. Not to destroy you, but to break your pattern of self-dependence. You were made for intimacy, not isolation. You were designed to walk with me, not ahead of me. And now, I'm calling you to stop, not slow down, not adjust, stop. Lay it down. The plans. The timeline. The image. The fight. Come back to the place of surrender where I can guide your steps again. You've proven you can move, but now I want to show you what happens when you move with me. I won't compete with your urgency. I won't chase after your detours. If you insist on walking into fire without me, I will let you learn through the burns. But if you turn now, If you drop the pride, the rush, the independence, I will meet you again, not with shame, but with strategy. I will take what scorched you and use it to forge wisdom. I will walk with you through what you were never supposed to face alone, and turn it into a testimony that doesn't glorify your pain, but my faithfulness. But the next step must be different. It cannot be yours alone, because if you walk into another fire without me, I will not interfere. And this time, the flames will not wait. I reached for you, not because I needed validation, but because I knew where you were heading, and I saw how fragile the supports were that you leaned on. I watched as you placed confidence in systems that don't know your name, in voices that shift with the wind, in promises that sound good but are hollow underneath. You built your foundation on applause, on control, on certainty shaped by your own limited understanding, and every time I asked you to shift your weight onto me, you hesitated. You trusted what you could see, what felt familiar, what let you stay in charge. But everything you're clinging to is unstable. I tried to warn you when the cracks started forming. I whispered when your peace started slipping. I pulled back just enough so you'd notice how quickly things fall apart without me. But instead of turning, you reinforced your own scaffolding, patching weak structures with performance and pretending it was strength. I wasn't looking for perfection. I was looking for dependence. But you kept offering plans when I asked for surrender. You kept managing when I asked you to rest. You called it wisdom, but I saw it for what it really was: fear-wearing strategy as a mask. I needed your heart, not your control. Your devotion, not your hustle. And the more you trusted your own strength, the further you drifted from the shelter I designed for you. You kept praying with your mouth, but your posture was full of resistance. You asked me to guide you while walking in directions I never approved. And now, those things you leaned on are breaking. Not by my hand, but by their own inability to carry what only I can sustain. The plans are unraveling. The people are fading. The opportunities are stalling. And though you want to blame the enemy, what you're facing isn't sabotage, it's exposure. Exposure of how much faith you placed in what could never last. You relied on income more than intimacy, influence more than instruction, predictability more than presence. And now that it's slipping, you're angry, not because you miss me, but because your illusion of control is being challenged. I'm not tearing you down to harm you. I'm allowing what you trusted to reveal its limits, so you finally understand that I was never asking for part of your trust. I was asking for all of it. I never asked you to figure it out. I asked you to follow. But you kept grasping for what felt safe, even as it started slipping through your hands. And now, I must let it fall. I must let what you built without me collapse, so you will stop reinforcing it with more ambition, more striving, more of your own effort dressed up as perseverance. I've waited patiently, letting you learn, letting you stretch, letting you feel the difference between surviving in your own strength and resting in mine. But each time you tasted emptiness, you didn't run to me. You dug deeper into why I never called you to dig. I'm not punishing you. I'm inviting you to awaken before what you're leaning on fully gives way beneath you. Because it will. Not because I want it to fail, but because anything not rooted in me eventually must. Your heart wasn't designed to carry this tension forever. You weren't made to serve me outwardly while inwardly relying on something else. You pray for breakthrough but refuse to release the very things blocking it. You ask for direction, but only if it confirms what you already decided. That's not trust, that's negotiation. And I will not be negotiated with. I am not a consultant in your life plan. I am the cornerstone. I must be the starting point, not the backup when other options fall through. I didn't call you into relationships so I could fix what you built. I called you so we could build together, from the ground up, with my ways as the framework. But you kept using me like insurance, covering what you already claimed for yourself. You've grown weary, not because I've withheld peace, but because carrying what doesn't belong to you is exhausting. It always will be. And now, The weariness is revealing the truth, that you've placed confidence in things that respond to pressure with failure. What I build can withstand anything, but what you've erected in self-reliance will always tremble when the winds rise. And the winds are rising. That's not a threat. It's a truth. Storms are coming that only those grounded in me will endure without collapse. You can't keep patching walls I never asked you to build. You can't keep adjusting blueprints I never wrote. You can't keep trusting temporary scaffolding and expect eternal stability. I gave you so many chances to shift your weight onto me. Through difficulty, through unexpected provision, through delayed plans. And each one was an invitation to lean, to yield, to trade your balance for mine. But you've kept one foot in and one foot out, always ready to fall back on yourself in case I don't move fast enough. I see through it all. I'm not fooled by lifted hands and surrendered words if your heart is still anchored in what you fear losing. I'm asking for more than Sunday belief. I'm asking for weekday dependence. I'm asking for midnight trust when everything feels uncertain and no one is watching. That's where true faith breathes, not in perfect outcomes but in imperfect obedience. And now, I'm calling you out of this double-minded living. I'm not angry, I'm grieved. Because I've watched you carry burdens I was ready to take. I've seen you cry in silence, refusing to drop the weight because you're still hoping you can manage it. But I never asked you to manage, I asked you to release. If you let it go, I will teach you to walk again. If you admit your trust has been misplaced, I will show you what real freedom feels like. But the longer you stay in this divided place, the more vulnerable you become to collapse, not from an attack, but from your own design. Come back to the place where I'm not just your safety net, but your center. Let me hold what breaks you. Let me carry what you've outgrown. Because the next step I require from you will not be possible until your trust is placed fully where it always belonged, in me alone. You're exhausted not because you're under attack, but because you've been fighting to keep alive something I've been calling you to lay to rest. You defend it like it's your lifeline, but it's become your chain. You justify it with logic, sentiment, and past sacrifices. But I see straight through the reasoning. I see the fear underneath. The hidden corners you don't speak about, the inner vows you made in moments of pain that now rule over your decisions like silent dictators. You've convinced yourself it's necessary, that letting go would equal failure or waste. But I'm telling you, it's the very thing keeping you from the fullness you cry out for in secret. What you protect is bleeding you slowly, draining your spirit, fogging your discernment, numbing your joy. And I've sent warning after warning, not to shame you but to save you. Still, you insist on covering it with spiritual words and calling it faithfulness, when in truth, it's fear of change, fear of exposure, fear of the unknown. You're not loyal to my voice, you're loyal to your comfort. And that comfort is costing you everything. I never asked you to fight for what doesn't have my blessing. I didn't assign you to preserve what is decaying. I called you to walk in freedom, and freedom always required loss. You cannot receive what I've prepared if your hands remain full of what I've already asked you to surrender. And yes, I know it hurts. Yes, I know you've invested tears, time, and your heart into this, but when something becomes an idol, even your tears can't justify keeping it. When you defend dysfunction in the name of endurance, you're not operating in strength, you're living in deception. You think you're being faithful, but you're really afraid of the silence that follows surrender. You've attached your worth to something I never meant to define you. And now, every time I ask you to release it, you recoil, because you've confused the object with your identity. But I need you to understand. I'm not trying to take from you. I'm trying to free you. I'm not cruel, I'm holy. And what's holy cannot coexist with what you refuse to examine. I've whispered gently. I've allowed the discomfort to rise. I've blocked doors, removed people, dried up provision, not to destroy you, but to show you this path is leading nowhere good. Yet instead of asking me what to cut, you doubled down on protecting what is slowly destroying your inner life. You've even begun calling my boundaries attacks, calling my discipline delay, calling my correction rejection. But child, I am not rejecting you. I'm rescuing you. Rescuing you from cycles that have enslaved generations in your lineage. Rescuing you from the weight of performance. Rescuing you from agreements you made with survival, agreements that no longer serve who you are becoming. The voice you're ignoring is the same voice that formed you in the womb. And if I, your creator, am saying to let it go, then who else's opinion will you trust more than mine? If you keep clinging, it will cost you access to what you've been begging me for. I will not pour new wine into old wineskins. I will not pour out promise where pride still sits on the throne. I will not bless what refuses to come into alignment. And I say this not in anger, but in truth, because truth is love. The days of defending the very thing graining you are ending. I am removing the veil. I am shining the light. I am cutting away what you thought you needed so I can give you what you were born for. This moment is not about how much longer you can hold on. It's about how much longer you will delay the joy that only comes when you finally let go. Choose now. Don't delay again. What you defend today may be the very thing that keeps you from your destiny tomorrow. You stood at the edge of breakthrough more times than you realize, but every time I opened the gate, you hesitated. Not because I failed to prepare you, but because you refused to believe it can really be for you. You pray for change, but when it shows up in the form of sacrifice, you step back and wait for something easier. You've lingered in hesitation while heaven was ready to move. You've asked for confirmation again and again, but the truth is, the moment passed not because I changed my mind, but because you froze. Destiny doesn't always shout, it requires movement when faith whispers. You want the fullness of what I've declared, but you're still arguing with me about the timing, still analyzing whether you will be ready tomorrow. But tomorrow has stolen too much already. You say you're not prepared, but what you really mean is you're not willing. Not willing to walk in the dark before the light proves itself. Not willing to risk looking foolish if it doesn't work out the way you imagine. But let me tell you something. Faith never waits for the facts to align. Faith walks because I said move. And now, the border of promise is not waiting much longer. You're looking at open territory, land that's been marked with your name, but your feet are still planted in what's familiar. You're carrying the weight of delay, not because I didn't speak, but because you've built a lifestyle around postponing obedience. You've convinced yourself that caution is wisdom, but what you call being careful, I call being disobedient. I never asked you to make sure it made sense first. I asked you to follow me with a heart that trusts beyond logic. I told you I would go before you. I promised to clear the obstacles. But you've grown so used to waiting that now movement feels foreign. You sat at the edge of miracles for so long that they now seem unreachable. But child, I haven't changed what I said. The inheritance is still available, but your hesitation is making the road longer than it ever needed to be. You say you're tired, but what's exhausting you is the resistance within, not the journey itself. You delay the first step, and that delay creates spiritual friction. Unrest that wears down your peace, your focus, your faith. I didn't ask you to cross the whole distance in one leap. I asked for one step. And that step, delayed too long, becomes disobedience dressed as indecision. You've been circling mountains you were meant to leave behind. You've repeated cycles that should have been broken. And now, I tell you clearly, I will not leave the promise waiting forever. If you will not walk forward, I will raise up others who will. Not because I love them more, but because they said yes when you stayed silent. This is not about punishment. This is about fulfillment. My word will come to pass, with or without your participation. I want it to be with you. I want your name written into the fulfillment of this season. But if you choose fear again, if you retreat once more, if you keep measuring the risk instead of trusting the call, you may watch what could have been yours pass into the hands of someone who dared to move. I speak this not to condemn, but to awaken. You still have a moment to respond. You still have time to rise. But that window is not endless. Destiny has rhythm. and that rhythm has now reached a breaking point. If you don't respond to what I've already made clear, you will miss what was tailored for your life. I'm not saying this to pressure you. I'm saying it to spare you from regret. Don't wait another hour. Don't demand more signs. You don't need more clarity. You need more courage. Step into the place I marked out for you. Cross the border. The land is still waiting. But I will not keep the gate open while you build more excuses. It's open now. Will you finally walk? There comes a moment when my voice must grow quiet, not because I no longer care, but because pleading with you will only further your delay. I've spoken gently. I've sent confirmations. I've placed signs along your path and stirred your heart in private. But you've continued to hold tightly to situations I've already pronounced closed. You cling to memories like anchors, refusing to acknowledge that some doors are sealed by my mercy, not your mistake. I've told you it's over. I've told you it was not your portion. I've told you that relationship, that environment, that attachment was never built to endure the weight of your calling. Still, you hold on, hoping that your effort will reverse what my wisdom has already severed. I cannot bless what I've already removed. I will not empower what I've already deconstructed. And if you continue to grasp what is lifeless, you will drain yourself trying to resurrect what I buried for your protection. There's a difference between loyalty and bondage. There's a line between faithfulness and foolishness. And I tell you now, you are walking dangerously close to a place where I must step back, not because I've stopped loving you, but because love will not override your will. If you insist on keeping dead things alive, I will not compete for your attention. I do not beg. I invite. I do not chase rebellion. I lead those who follow. And you, my child, are standing at a divine crossroad, not between good and evil, but between surrender and self-preservation. The longer you delay releasing what I already rejected, the more distant my next instruction will feel. Not because I'm hiding, but because you filled your heart with so much noise, there's no space left for direction. I am not one voice among many. I must be the only voice that governs your yes. You say you want clarity, but clarity cannot enter a heart obsessed with keeping control. You say you want peace, but peace is not the absence of consequence. It is the presence of alignment. And you, beloved, have misnamed your unrest. You've been calling it an attack when it's really my spirit refusing to let you settle where you don't belong. I have a future for you. Yes, one that's overflowing with meaning, purpose, restoration, and divine impact. But it cannot be reached while you are dragging the baggage of unfinished chapters behind you. You want resurrection, but you're still mourning what I never asked you to grieve. You want movement, but your grip is tighter on the past than it is on my promise. And so, here is the line I draw today. You must decide whether you will stay with what is known or move with me into what is next. I will not wait for you to circle around indecision any longer. I will not pause the movement of heaven while you rehearse what could have been. The time for remembering is over. The time for stepping forward is now. I'm calling your spirit to attention. I'm summoning your obedience, not your analysis. I'm igniting the fire in your soul that once burned freely, before hesitation became your default. I didn't create you to be imprisoned by what's already expired. I formed you for momentum, for transformation, for glory, and that glory will never be found in what I've left behind. Let go. Drop it all. Even if it breaks your heart. Even if it makes no sense to those watching. Even if it shatters your pride. This is the obedience that unlocks what's been delayed. This is the yielding that silences the torment. This is the final invitation before I shift my attention to those who are ready. I will always love you, but I will not force your surrender. Choose now, because I am already moving. Do not be deceived by how quiet this moment feels, for the stillness is not absence, it is transition. Right now, while you are weighing the risk of obedience, the wheels of my purpose are accelerating. While you hesitate, the door is beginning to swing shut, not out of cruelty, but consequence. I warned you the pace would pick up. I told you that my timeline would not slow to accommodate your indecision. And yet, you linger at the threshold, hoping I'll hold the gate open while you delay again. But this time, child, there will be no extended window. There will be no repeat offering. This is not a season to observe. This is a season that demands reaction. While you're rehearsing the pros and cons, I'm already raising up others to take positions meant for your hands. Not because I prefer them, but because they moved without requiring confirmation. Number 5. The ones who step now will inherit what you once asked me for with tears, but never trusted me enough to walk toward. Don't you see? Your faith is not proven in what you say during prayer. It's proven in what you do after I speak. I gave you the word. I opened the door. I even cleared the obstacles you feared would block the way. But now that the path is clear, your feet have frozen, not because I've failed, but because you've let the familiar become your master. You've allowed routine to make you numb to revelation. You want revival, but you fear destruction. You cry out for increase, but still embrace comfort like it's your security blanket. But I do not move where comfort reigns. I move where courage dares to rise. And right now, I'm separating the ones who only admire my power from the ones who are willing to carry it. This is not about feelings anymore. This is about response. When I said follow me, I never promised convenience. I never said your friends would applaud you. I never guaranteed a perfect landing. But I did promise presence. I did promise that I would walk with you into every unknown. I did promise that I would uphold you when the ground beneath you felt unstable. But that promise only activates when your feet leave where they are. If you're still waiting to feel ready, then you've misunderstood the nature of faith. Faith does not wait for certainty. It steps before clarity ever arrives. And if you keep delaying until it makes sense, you will stay planted in a life you were never designed to settle for. The boat feels safer than the waves, but it was the waves that carried Peter to me. And child, I'm not in the boat anymore. I'm standing on the water, calling your name, stretching out my hand while you stare at the security of the familiar. But hear me, the familiar is fading. The structure you trusted is about to give way. The support you've leaned on is losing its grip. Not because I want you to suffer, but because I want you to step. Every second you remain in the place I'm leaving, you fall further behind. Every excuse becomes a wall between us. And the longer you justify your passivity, the more deaf you'll become to my leading. You think you have more time, but I tell you, time is collapsing around you. Doors that were once wide are narrowing. Assignments are being rerouted. Anointings are shifting. Mantles are transferring. And I won't wait for you to catch up if you choose paralysis again. I'm moving forward, with or without you. My mercy is eternal, but my moments are not. And this moment, right now, is pregnant with purpose that will not pause. Decide. Move. Obey. Or watch the opportunity that had your name on it pass into the hands of someone who didn't need another sign, only a command. Do you not understand that this hour is sacred, that I am orchestrating a handoff of authority, influence, and assignments at a divine pace, and only those who respond without hesitation will grasp what is being poured out? I am not scattering crumbs. I am releasing mantles of governance in the spiritual realm, keys that unlock generational impact, blueprints written in heaven for this very window in history. But these are not given to the curious. They are entrusted to the bold, to those who don't require the full staircase to take the first step. I am choosing builders, intercessors, pioneers, carriers of my fire, and I am moving fast. I have observed the hearts that tremble yet still advance. I have watched the few who said yes while still wiping tears from yesterday's battles. That are the ones I will trust with the weight of what I am about to unleash. Because they did not wait for ideal conditions. Because they heard my whisper and obeyed before the thunder rolled. Because they didn't argue with timing. They aligned with it. You, child, have been circling around readiness instead of walking in obedience. You've mistaken analysis for wisdom and fear for discernment. But I don't require your confidence. I require your commitment. What I'm releasing cannot wait until you feel qualified. If qualifications were the standard, David would have remained in the field. If perfection were the measure, Peter would have never stepped back into purpose after denial. I'm not looking for flawless. I'm looking for surrendered. And surrender isn't passive. Surrender looks like movement even when understanding hasn't arrived. The blessing you're praying for is already positioned, but it's ahead of you, not beside you. And the longer you wait to advance, the more you distance yourself from what I've assigned. You've been saying, God, if it's you, open the door. But I already have. The threshold is right in front of you, and your foot is the missing part of the equation. If you delay any longer, I will hand that key to another, not as punishment, but because I cannot risk sacred strategy being held by someone unwilling to walk when I speak. This is a divine transaction, and time is part of its structure. What is meant to activate now will not activate in a year. The oil prepared for this moment will remain in its vessel forever. The cloud is shifting. The fire is moving. And if you refuse to follow, you will find yourself staring at a barren land that once pulsed with potential. I will not plant my seed in soil that chooses comfort over cultivation. And though I grieve the choices that keep you stuck, I will not allow disobedience to halt what I've declared over this generation. I'm looking for movement, not maintenance. I'm looking for obedience, not observation. You can no longer stand still and expect me to remain where you last felt me. My presence is moving toward places your feet have not touched. And I'm calling you to trust me enough to follow without the whole map. What I will reveal on the next side will dwarf what you're currently clinging to. But I will not drag you there. I will not wrestle you into destiny. You must walk. You must risk. You must say yes. The ones who do will carry fire in their bones. They will speak and darkness will scatter. They will build what others only dreamed of. They will see me move in ways they've only read about. Because they understood the urgency of my voice. Because they didn't just feel conviction. They acted on it. Child, the exchange is ready. Heaven's response is prepared. But you must step into the transfer. This is that moment. You either receive what is being released, or you watch it be placed into the hands of another. You keep calling it loss, but I call it refinement. What you're grieving, I removed. What you're mourning, I dismantled. Not to break you, but to clear the interference that kept blinding you from my truth. I'm not cruel. I'm not careless. But I am unwilling to compete for your attention any longer. I watched as you gave your heart to lesser things, as you clung to routines that numbed your soul, and as you continually diluted my voice with noise that kept your spirit dull. So now, I've begun to strip away the illusions. The people who couldn't steward your future have fallen silent. The opportunities that pulled you away from your purpose have crumbled. The comforts that once convinced you to stay still are slipping from your grasp. And though you call it a shaking, I call it mercy. I could no longer allow you to drift further into delay. I could no longer watch you build altars around things I never told you to worship. This is your unveiling, not punishment. Exposure, not for shame, but to bring you to clarity. You've asked for me to speak louder, and now, I have not with volume but with removal. Because sometimes my greatest answers come through subtraction. I've watched you ask for breakthrough while maintaining alliances with distractions. I've seen you pray for alignment while keeping ties to what misaligned you. But now, child, I've cleared the room. I silenced the crowd. And it's just you and me. No more noise to blame. No more confusion to lean on. You can hear me clearly now, not because I changed, but because everything else fell away. This moment is sacred. Don't misread the emptiness. It is not abandonment. It is preparation. I am drawing your heart to a place where obedience has no competition. I've removed the scaffolding so you can no longer pretend your stability came from anything but me. What's left now is choice, raw, honest choice, No more props. No more excuses. Just me, and you, and the full weight of your answer. I'm no longer asking for a halfway response. I'm demanding a surrendered yes, the kind that doesn't need to see the outcome before it moves. You've asked for me to do something drastic to help you obey, and I have. Now that the noise is gone, what will you do with the silence? Will you fill it again with temporary pleasures? Will you run to another counterfeit comfort? Or will you finally break the cycle and turn your face fully toward mine? I have waited long enough. I've stretched my mercy to its limits, not because I am weak, but because my love is fierce. I wanted to give you space to choose me freely. But now, I see that every delay has only hardened the walls around your heart. So I've allowed the shaking, not to destroy you, but to shake loose everything you've leaned on but never needed. The idols are falling. The crutches are snapping. The false dependencies are unraveling. Because I want your worship to rise from purity, not performance. I want your yes to be born in truth, not fear. So here you are, stripped of the noise, naked of excuses, standing before the threshold of something sacred, and I will not wait much longer for your next move. I am releasing others into acceleration, and their footsteps are already echoing in places you once prayed to reach. You still have breath. You still have time, but not time to waste. This is not a rehearsal. This is not a practice run. This is the defining moment of surrender I've been leading you toward all along. I am drawing the line, not in anger, but in holy clarity. I will not wait while you flirt with distractions. I will not delay destiny while you dance around obedience. I am here now, raw, close, relentless, and this time, child, you cannot pretend you didn't hear me. You keep asking why the doors haven't opened, why the favor hasn't flowed, why the breakthrough feels withheld, but you're still gripping what I never authorized. You've grasped disobedience and persistence and called it faith. You've clung to connections I already dissolved, praying I'd bless what I've already rejected. You've pursued platforms that never carried my permission, hoping the spotlight would compensate for the silence in your spirit. What I don't empower what isn't birthed through intimacy. I don't fuel efforts that come from striving rather than surrender. You're walking in circles, not because I haven't spoken, but because you're negotiating with what I told you to abandon. I've been waiting for a moment of full compliance, not partial sacrifice, not conditional obedience, but complete detachment from the plans you built without me. The delay is not demonic, it's diagnostic. It reveals what your heart still craves more than my will. And child, as long as you try to force me to accommodate your version of the future, you will live outside of alignment. I will not bless a blueprint that my spirit didn't design. I don't co-sign rebellion disguised as ambition. And your stubbornness is not strength, it's resistance in a spiritual costume. I'm not angry with you, but I am confronting you. Because I love you too deeply to let you stay entangled in patterns that steal your oil. You've worn yourself out chasing confirmations for decisions you already know are outside of my voice. But now, I am removing the option to pretend you didn't know better. I am severing the attachments, closing the paths, and locking the gates that lead to compromise. You may call it loss, but it is me rescuing you. I have protected you from outcomes that looked appealing but were rotted at the core. And still, you mourn what I removed, as if I didn't see what you couldn't. You think the pause is punishment, but it is a barrier of mercy. If I allowed you to proceed with what you idolize, it would devour you. So I've interrupted your strategy, not because it lacked skill, but because it lacked surrender. I don't need your brilliance. I need your brokenness. I don't want your performance. I want your positioning. And as long as you keep trying to fit me into your narrative, you'll remain outside the flow of what I've appointed. You cry out for acceleration, but you refuse the pruning. You demand increase, yet resist correction. But I cannot release what I've prepared until you release what's disqualified. I'm not holding back. You are holding on. You say you trust me, yet you argue every time I ask you to let go. You say I'm your shepherd, Yet you wander into pastures I never led you toward. I am not confused about your calling, but I will not force you to step into it while your loyalty belongs elsewhere. This is the moment where truth meets decision. No more delays blamed on circumstances. No more waiting on another prophetic word. You've already heard me. You've already sensed me. And now, I need your response. Not later. Not after you see results. But now, in the middle of your wrestle. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be honest. Will you let me lead even if it dismantles what you carefully constructed? Will you trust my version of your future more than your fantasy of control? If not, I will pass the mantle to one who says yes with open hands. Not because I'm discarding you, but because my purpose will not be held hostage by delay. Choose now. Surrender now. Because the next move of heaven will not wait for you to feel ready. It's already in motion, and the only question left is whether you'll step into it or stand in the ruins of your resistance. Amen.